Hi everyone. Today we will see how to integrate ChatGPT or OpenAI API into Fast API. So basically, how can we build, let's say, the backend web application or a GPT powered backend API? That's what we're going to see in this particular video. So what is exactly the agenda? So first of all, we will see how to install and run Fast API. We will be using VS Code for that purpose. I just put some notes, some code snippet here so that I can copy them whenever I need it and I don't waste time typing those things. So we're going to see how to install and run Fast API. Then we will see how to create get and post endpoints in our API. Then we will see how to pass the query parameters, or let's say the body parameters into the Fast API endpoints. And then we will see how can we access our own API that we created in a Fast API using the Python request library. And we will understand the pydantic models, which is there to add some data validation or data parsing for our request data. And eventually finally we will see how to integrate the chat gpt openai into the Fast API. So in this particular tutorial I assume that you are familiar with what is API and that kind of stuff, but you might not have, let's say, any experience with the Fast API. So that's perfectly fine if you haven't tried Fast API, because I'm treating this as a beginner friendly kind of a tutorial and we will go through step by step. As I said, I have put some code here, so this might feel overwhelming, but no need to worry, because I'm just going to pick up whatever we needed for that particular step and we're going to go step by step. So let's do one thing. First, let's we need to install, first of all, what we're going to require. We're going to require Fast API, and if you go to the Fast API website, you can see exactly what we want to get it start with, right? So we need a Fast API and we need a UVCon server so that we can run our API, right? So we require Fast API, we require UVCon, OpenAI definitely, and let's say Pydantic. Pydantic should be the dependency of this, but let's try. So what we will do first, let's create first virtual environment, right, for our project. So let's do that thing. So maybe what I can do, you can see we don't have anything here. Okay, we don't have anything here. So what we will do first, let's create a virtual environment. Let me call it, let's call Python hyphen name. What we're going to create, we want to create the virtual environment and we can give name to it. Let's say we can call it like a fast environment, right? And this will take some time, maybe a couple of seconds, and we should see our environment getting created. So you could see we got this file, right? So we have a virtual environment so that whatever we install, it will not, let's say, interfere with my existing libraries or something what I have, right? On Windows, how can we activate? So first of all, I can go to this Fast API. So usually I'm typing this like a, and then I'm pressing tab so that it is auto completing, right? And then I know we need to go to the script folders and then we have to call activate. So you could see once it is activated, we could see we are in our environment. Now we can install whatever thing we want to install. So let's create maybe let's create one folder. Let's create one folder called app, and inside that folder we will create our requirement.txt, requirements.txt. Okay, and there we can put our requirement. Let's first try only this three and see whether it works. Okay, I'm going to copy this thing. Fast API, UVCon, and OpenAI. That's what we're going to require. How do we install requirement file? So we use, let's say, pip install. We give the requirement file path. Again, I'm typing something and I'm pressing tab, and it should, okay, we are not in that directory. So let's go to the app directory now. And now let's install the pip install hyphen r and the requirements.txt. Right. Okay, invalid. Okay, the flag is not proper. Let's do this thing. Okay, so it started collecting, and it will eventually right. One more thing we will require, let's create minimal, it is let's create something called main.py, which is usually, let's Fast API application. So it has installed completely. Let me clear this thing. you know so let's create the basic Fast API application. What we require, so let's import Fast API. From the Fast API we can import it, and then we can simply create one single endpoint. I will explain what exactly we are doing. Right, so we imported Fast API, and then we initialize or create the object of that Fast API, and then using that object we can declare the endpoints. So endpoint means, like, for example, let's say you have a website called xyz.com, then slash after whatever you can give, that is what your endpoint. Let's say you are hosting your endpointer, right? So let's see. So this is how you declare the get endpoint, and then you define the whatever the URL after your main domain, right? And then you define what function should be called when someone visited this particular URL. So let's run this thing, and that will be clear for us. So whenever someone going to visit slash OK for our URL, we're going to make a get request to this particular endpoint slash OK. We want to execute this function, and that function will simply return this dictionary, right? So how do we run? To run the fast API, as we have installed uvcon, so we use, let's say, uvcon command to run, which is a server. And then we have to specify the name of the file where our app is there. So name of the file is this main colon, and where what is the name of our instance, which is actually the app. So that's what we do, right? And then we can provide one more flag called reload. So whenever you make any changes and you do control s, like when you save it, it will reload, right? So let's run this thing, and you could see here that it started running on port 8000, right? So let's go here, and you see there is nothing running on our home a slash there is nothing running on our main let's say endpoint. So let's, but what endpoint we have declared, this is what I'm telling. So we have declared slash OK. This is the URL that they should visit, right? And you could see if they visit, they will see message is equal to OK. So this is nothing but our endpoint, whatever we have declared, which is the get endpoint. That's why we are able to visit via browser also. But the best thing about the fast API is actually you can access, it's a Swagger docs, which is our actually docs slash docs. So you can think of this as also one of kind of an endpoint. And you could see our all the endpoints, whatever we're going to declare, they are here. You could see it's a get request, and the good thing is you can try it out. All right, and you'd see it doesn't require any parameters, because if you look at our request, it doesn't have any parameters, right? And you can execute and see what's coming, and you could see you got the body, simply whatever the message is equal to okay what we have typed. So this is like you can think of an hello world fast API application, where we simply declared one endpoint, and eventually we are able to get. So how do we pass? Let's say we want to pass some kind of a get parameter, and right. So let's try one more request. Let's say this request, we can try declare one more endpoint, right? And let's say if I do control yes now, so it's see, it has detected that I changed something, and it restarted again this application, right? Now I declare one more endpoint called this hello. What it does, so it's going to trigger this particular function. But if you could see, this function can now take one parameter. The parameter is called name, right? This is like a specifying data type. That name is going to be a string, and this is the default value. If no one if let's say we didn't get any parameter name in the request, this is going to be its default value, and eventually we're going to return, let's say, hello world or hello that particular thing, right? Very basic thing, what we have done. Again, this async parameter is there because you can run thing asynchronously. You can read more about it. So basically, when server receives this request, let's say to fulfill this request, it has to do some extra thing, like it might have to make a database call, some other network call, or making an, let's say, GPT-3 kind of request, right? By making it async means it's what, when it is going to receive this request, right, the server instance or whatever the thread or process is not going to wait till the database operation is complete, or till the API response. Rather, it will go and serve the next request coming to the server, right? So you can read more about it, right? That this way it can handle actually more requests simultaneously, right? And let's go and check this new endpoint what we have just added, right? So let's go here and refresh this docs, and we should see our new endpoint coming. Both are the get request, right? Now let's try it out, and you could see it takes one parameter now called name, and it has a default value world, right? So if you execute it, you could see it is telling you the hello world. And if you could pass, let's say, your name and execute, it will say hello Pradeep, because that's what the parameter. So pretty simple, very easy to specify the what parameter is going to take, which is nothing but the whatever the endpoint you have declared, and whatever the function associated with that endpoint, you can declare there what parameter it is going to receive. And this way you can also declare the default parameter. Now let's see, let's make a post request now. Okay, this is what we have been doing, kind of so I think since it is a GET request, we should be able to do similarly what we did earlier, right? Let's see if you could visit, not this one, what is our 127, right? This, and we can put this slash hello, and then we can pass name as a, because it's a GET request, we should be able to do it with the browser, and we get the same result, right? Now let's try the post request. Let me copy this one post request here, and then we go through it. So let's see, I created one more endpoint called orders. Okay, it's a dummy endpoint. What it does actually, it takes two parameter. One is the product, other is the, let's say, the units. It's like, how many uh, let's say we saying like, like order for one laptop. So that kind of things we can, displaying here. Now let's see if we declare the post, kind of endpoint, like what you see on the here. Let's look at this thing. Now we have, so you can see it's a post request, we are passing the orders, and again it's the same thing. We have declared two parameter. One is the product and the other is the units, right? So if you look here, it was an optional, so default, there was a default value for it, right? Here you could see it was compulsory because we haven't declared it as an option. You could also see one of them is a string, other one is the integer, right? So this is, the Swagger docs are really good actually, and everything remained the same, right? Everything remained the same. What you did, you just changed from, get to post, and see, look at this curl request, maybe, how things has changed. Did we fire any request? No. Let's try it out and see what happens, right? So let's say product, I would say laptop, and, one unit. So this is what it gives, the order for one unit of laptop placed successfully. Maybe this is not that good, but yeah, this is what you will get into the response. Look at the curl request, right? This is interesting thing. So when we you using the post request, right, and when we are declare this parameter, even those parameters are going like a URL, or what you call the query parameters, right? This is called the, query parameters. Now we will be able to access this with the same what we did here, do you think? No, this is not the GET request that you can simply type in URL. This is the post request, right? So we can't make like this, at least as per my understanding. So though it is passing as a query parameter, right, we can't make. So let's make that request using, let's say, Python. So we know that, Python, we have a request library, right? So let's take something, a code snippet, that how to make a request in a Python. Here you go, the documentation. So we can use the request library. We specify where we want to make a request. We can pass header that, we're going to accept, a response as a JSON, and then this is the parameters we want to do. This you need to focus, because, as I mentioned earlier, that, we're going to see what's the difference between passing the parameters and passing actually the body information. So let's copy this thing and we will make a request and we will see what happens. Maybe I create here one more file. Maybe I call it like request.py. This is not actually part of our, fast API. This is just we created so that we can make a request, right? So you could see we're going to make request to our own API, which is the slash orders, right? Headers, because we're going to accept the application, JSON as a response. Since we saw that when you declare something like this, these parameters, they actually come as a query parameters, right? So we want to make sure we pass them as a query parameters when we are making the request from, let's say, this is what any other developer, or you are making a request to your own API. So we pass parameters as a product, laptop, and the units as a one. And request library is like easy and very intuitive, like request.post, which URL you want to make, any header information you want to pass, and then finally the parameters. And ideally we should be able to get the same response. So let's see if I go to the PowerShell, right, and let's run this file, the Python request is the name. Yeah, we need to go into the CD app first, right? And then we do the Python request.py, and you could see we got the same response. So this is how you can connect with your own API. I know most of them you are already familiar with how to make a request. I just wanted to show the difference between this thing, because the next step what we're going to see, you will see the clear difference, right? So here this is nothing but the passing data as a query parameters, right? Let's go to the documentation for a minute. Where is the documentation? I think, yeah, I had a link here, right? Let's go there. Okay, so in the request library, when you make a request, right, you can pass the method, whether it's a get, post, and all of this thing. I want to highlight here. So when you want to pass something as a query parameters, you pass it like this using something called parameters, right, which can take in a dictionary, tuples, whatever, in a Python, right, as a query string parameter. That is an important thing. It is going as a query string. That's what we just saw here, right? Going something like this versus post method. But then you can pass not as a query parameter with the query string, but actually the body of your request. Inside the body, then you have to pass data. So let's see how do we make sure in fast API we accept the data as a body of the request, and not as a query parameter. That also we can going to see. That's where this pydantic those models are going to come into picture. So let me go to our code again here, right? We saw this thing, right? Now let's do one thing. How do we make sure that we force it to kind of what I say, pass it as a body request body this data and not in the query parameters. Did we even test it on here? Hello order. Yes, we did test it, right? We did test it, this thing. Now the next thing we want to do in our thing is actually this, this pydantic model. This is where they're going to bring some kind of a validation to our data, what we're going to receive. So let's copy this thing and we will define some structure to our, let's say we want to make sure orders, we're going to receive it as some kind of a object or a body. Maybe I'm repeating a lot of stuff. Let's go and what we want. Yeah, we want to define this pydantic model, so we need to import it, from pydantic, import this base model. This is where we can specify, hey, we're going to take input as a class product. So that I'm going to receive a data called product, which is going to have a name, which is a string, and the nodes, right? So in our case, what we are using, so we don't want name, we want the product, and then we want to receive the units, which is actually the int. So let's make it int. So the product units as int, maybe we can call it as, let's call it as an order. Why we call it? Let's call it as an order, and then maybe we declare one more data point here. This we call maybe the order pydantic, just to right here, and here I want to receive it as a kind of order. So you see, rather than saying that it is a product and then unit and something like that, I am saying that, hey, I'm going to receive a order. What is its data type? The data type is order, which is nothing but, so it knows that it is going to receive is some instance of order which is going to have a product and the units associated with, right? So again, simply our messaging will also change, that how we access it, right? So now this time we should be able to access as a order dot units, because it is going to be part of order now. So it should be order dot units, and similarly it should be ordered at product, because it's an object that we're going to receive. And we will see now what's the difference in terms of that request structure. The thing that I was talking about, this is the query parameters, this is actually the request body. So now let's see, let's run this thing, let's refresh our app, so that we see one more data point. Now you see there is one more posting coming, right? And right, let's try it out. So again, it is also going to ask for the product and a string. Let's say product, again same thing, that laptop, and maybe I see two, and let me submit the request. I got the same, like order for 2 units of laptop placed successfully. Now we look at the difference between the, this is not going as a query parameters, you see here. Rather, it is going as a request body. So hyphen D in the curl statement is actually passing this data inside the request body, right? Now let's access our own API, passing this information inside the body of a request and not as a query parameter. How do we do that thing? Just little modification to our, let's me take this thing. I need to modify its names. Let's go to the request again. Maybe, it's the same thing. Only if you, okay, maybe I can do this like now only, right? So parameter, instead of parameter, this needs to go as the data, because we just saw in the API documentation, if you want to pass data, right? Again, we can say, we are passing, let's say, content application, content type is an application, JSON only. We, yeah, let's say, we want to accept as a JSON, we also want to pass it as a JSON only, this parameter. Let's say the data. Now here, these are the parameters what we have. We need to maybe we have to import the JSON, and then let's pass it as a JSON terms. So this was, let's say, the dictionary, right? The Python object. So we use JSON.terms method, so that this goes as a JSON. So I hope it works. Laptop units, and instead of parameters, we're going to pass it as a JSON, right? And let's see, and we should see something is missing. What it is saying? Okay, we need to change the See, this is good thing. Now it was missing that particular parameter, right? So it was missing a parameter in the query, because we are calling the orders, but we need to call our new API that we just created, which is the orders pydantic. So let's use this thing, order is identical and it should now work. Okay, so you could see it's working now. So this how, but this is the difference, right? When you declare something as a pydentic here, then it needs to be passed inside the request body and not as a query parameter. So ideally this is what the we should prefer. We should always declare it as a kind of a pydentic model, which is also kind of intuitive while reading, right? So what this endpoint is going to receive, this endpoint is going to receive order. What does order mean? So order going to have a product and it's going to have, let's say, the units, right? This is what it is going to receive. What will happen if I remove the JSON dump thing? Let's remove the JSON dump thing, uh, right, and just pass the plain information parameters, right? So let's pass, because anyway we are still passing the parameter product and unit inside the body, right? Let's see what happens. Attribute body input should be valid dictionary object to extract field from, but it's a valid dictionary, right? Application JSON identity, right? Request detail type model attribute type body. So it is actually looking that information in the body. That is fine. Input should be valid dictionary object to extract fields from. Maybe we can go and check this more, but yeah, this is what. That's why I think better we pass it as a, you know, what I say. Better we pass it as a JSON rather than passing. But I think the dictionary should have been, work. This is something interesting to check later. But yeah, so if you want to pass, you can pass it as a JSON object, just like what we earlier passed. Let's see whether it works or yeah, it worked. So you can try. Maybe I need to debug it bit. So it's better to pass when you are passing something in the body of the request, pass it as a JSON object, and that's what we did, and it worked. Okay, enough. So this was all about fast API. As I told you, it's like a beginner friendly fast API tutorial where I just wanted to show the difference between the query parameter, this thing, how do we declare gate and post request, how do we pass, let's say, parameter, how do we declare it as an optional, and all sorts of things, right? Now let's actually go and integrate our chat gpt into this, right? So we will create one more post api endpoint, right? Let's go and let me take the one more endpoint what we have, right? So let's say I want to generate the product description using chat gpt. So let me declare one endpoint here, right? So I declare one endpoint here called the product description, and I'm going to declare what exactly the product means. So this is where I'm using the pydentic, right? So let me, not this, what is this? Okay, we had already opened this thing. Let's copy the model, right? Declaring pydentic very easy. It's just simply declaring the class, and it's actually whatever the variables are going to be the parameter that we want to. Just like we declare the orders, now we want to declare the product. So it is going to receive the product, which is going to have a name, which is also going to be string, and the nodes is also going to be string. So that's what it is going to receive. Now it is not able to find the generate description. So generate description is the function that we're going to have, so that we make a request to gpt. So let's call the utils.py, and we will declare that that function there. So let me copy this thing. Now if you haven't I will explain what exactly we are doing here, but I would suggest you can go and watch my a beginner friendly tutorial on ChatGPT API that I had created. There you can go and maybe watch how do we integrate ChatGPT API and build a conversation. Right there, I explain things in detail. But still, to if you are still a beginner and not sure, this is what it does. So we're going to use actually something called chat completion endpoint, right? We're going to specify what model we want to use. We can specify GPT 3.5 or GPT 4 here. Since these are the chat models, right, they take input as a sequence of some kind of a conversation or the message history, right? So you could see the messages is nothing but the array of objects. What does each object has? Each object has one message. Okay, now each of this message has a role associated with it. Here role is a system, here role is a user, the role is assistant, right? Usually system role is something when you want to provide some instruction, overall instruction. We set the character of your chatbot. Here it is saying that you are a helpful assistant, right? Some kind of an instruction setting, right? Then you can provide example in the form of what user says and what bot replied. Bot is the assistant, right? So you are saying that user asked this, bot said this thing. Now again user asking this thing, now what should be the bot replying? That's what it is going to produce, right? In our case we don't require any conversation, we are just generating the product description. We just maybe require only this role or either this role. That is what we're going to require. We also don't need to remember what we ask earlier, right? So we just want to make the simple thing. But I want to tell you the next video that I'm going to create is actually that how do we build chat gpt backend for our chatbot. So let's say you are using chatbot and you have built some application which uses let's say your chat gpt also communicates with your internal system, internal documents, right? So how do we store that all information in the backend? How do we maintain the session, right? And how do we pass that relevant information to chat gpt from the backend? So this is what in the next video I'm going to build. How do we build a backend for the chat gpt, and we will use the fast api and we will see how to declare those session and all of those things, right? But for now we just want the simple thing, and that's what we're going to use. So let's come here and you will see ours is more simpler, right? So we just had only one object in that message list, right? Which is nothing but the system role, where we just want to give some instruction to it, right? Hey, just generate the product description, and I specifying that I want the multi paragraph rich text description. It should also include emojis and all sorts of things. That's what I'm telling. And again I'm appending these messages here, right? And then eventually we're going to make a request. I'm going to use gpt 3.5. You can put gpt 4 also here. And finally whatever the response we are getting, we're just going to return that response. Hopefully that response is actually your description, right? Let's go back to the main method right here. We need to import that function here. So from utils we need that function actually. Okay, from utils we require generate description. Not generate description. What is the function name? Yeah, correct. Generate product description. Hey, no, this is wrong. What did we declare here? Generate. Yeah, this is generate description. Correct. This is what we're going to call, right? And we're going to reply that instruction. Again, it's the post method. It is going to take up object called product, which is going to have the name and the notes, right? Let's try this thing and see whether it works. Where is our API? This is. Let's refresh it. We want, yeah, so this is the new endpoint. You can see the post request product description. Try it out, and we will see again a mobile product is, let's say, the mobile, and maybe the notes about is, maybe I would say 4 GB RAM. I would say maybe the 16 megapixel camera, and maybe less than maybe 10k rupees, something like that, let's say. And let's call, right? So what's happening when we are actually making a request to this product description? It is coming here, it has parsed whatever we wanted, then it is going to call our internal function called generate description, and that generate description simply going to pass whatever the input we have passed here as some kind of a content, right? And that once once we send it to chat gpt, we will get the response, and we're going to simply send that response back. So this seems to be finished, and you could see we got the response. Again you could see it is, we are passing in a hyphen d, means it is going to the request body, and this is the description we got, right? You could see we got some slash and twice. It means it does has a multi paragraph. It is also having emojis and all of this, right? So this is working, right? So if you're already somewhat familiar with how to make a chat gpt request, as I said, if you're not, there is a whole video that that I had created that you can go and check. Here I explain step by step what we are doing, but again in this video also I explained whatever we needed, right? Again this system, it could be, I think user role also directly. It need not to be just a system. So let's click a user role, right? And let's again make a request. You could see it should restarted. Yeah, our application is restarted. Now let's make a request again, since we have changed it to the user role, and it should still work, right? Okay, so you can see it can still work, right? So you can definitely but the whole idea is that use the system role to provide the overall instruction actually towards the bot, maybe to set its character, give some its information, right? Use user and assistant pair to give some examples, like that, hey, this is what if I input, this is what I want it to the output, and then you directly ask a new or test example, and it should complete with the role assistant. That's what it is going to do, right? And yeah, this is what and how you can integrate fast api and chat gpt to build. You can think of building a gpt powered apis or the web application backend. As I said, we're going to see how can we build let's say backend for the chatbot. So whatever the chatbot we see, right, we will see how can we build backend for the chatbot so that it can remember the what was the earlier conversation, right? So if I'm chatting with the chatbot, it is going to receive by this particular API, right? But it needs to know what was the other conversation in the same session, so it should be able to retrieve that conversation from the database, send it to chat gpt. So this whole sorts of how do we create the backend for our chatbot. That's what we will see maybe in the next video, right? If you have any other queries, let me know into the comments. Thank you.